Good afternoon, one and all present here. I, Dr. R. Anandi, Assistant Professor, Department of MCA, Dwarakdas Govardhandas Vaishnav College, Chennai, takes immense pleasure in delivering welcome address for this webinar on designing and applying microservices. I welcome Dr. T. Santanam sir, head of MCA department, faculty members, and my dear students for this webinar. This initiative is possible only by the support given by the management for the benefit of students. I extend a warm welcome to the resource person of today's webinar, Mr. Prashant Parekh, Chief Architect to CTS Chennai. I assure that this session will be useful for the blooming IT professionals to know about the process taking place in project development. Now, I invite Ms. A.S. Tenmuri, Assistant Professor of MCA Department, to introduce the resource person.
Good afternoon, all present here. This is Tenmuri Shanmukh from Department of MCA. It's my immense pleasure to give the introduction about our resource person, Mr. Prashant V. Parekh, Chief Architect to Enterprise Digital Solutions Architect. Another proud moment about that, he is an alumni of our prestigious institution, Govardhandas Vaishnav College. He studied Bachelor's Physics and a Master degree in Computer Applications under the University of Madras stream. Apart from this, also his other degrees are General Management Program, Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, Effective Communication Program from Carnegie Mellon University, Executive Eminence, Operational and Strategic Leadership Program in Financial Strategy and Implementation, Data Science and Machine Learning with Python. His career journey is 25 years of experience in developing technology products, point solutions, IT strategy, providing technology consulting, defining cloud architectures and roadmap for clients across financial data and information, manufacturing, retail, logistics, education, media and energy utility domains, providing IT consulting, enterprise architecture, and developing solutions for multinational and local corporations, extensive travel in order to locally provide solutions to clients in US, UK, Canada, Singapore, UAE. He is an employee of CTS India Private Limited, multi-phase technology solutions, software technical services, Dun and Bradstreet Satyam Software. Apart from this, he played vital roles. One among this, leads digital architect community across growth markets, develop platform-based venture solutions, e-commerce, virtual reality, and digital learning platforms. Hands-on proficiency in cloud technologies and software engineering practices, .NET, Python, Flask, Jinja 2, machine learning, LAMP stack, HTML5, Java to the WE stacks, ensure AWS clouds, virtual reality, Android, IoT, microservices, products for point solutions, technology consulting, IT portfolio, modernization, IT business strategy, Agile and DevSecOps engineering practices. And his achievements are incubate and build platform and venture solutions, omni-channel, commerce and content platform using LAMP stack, establish core VR studio and AR VR chat-based digital solutions using Unity 3D, C#, .NET, Android, Python, Web and AI, Microsoft, Google, Samsung, Facebook technologies. Build a team of 65 plus architects and technologists responsible to generate a sustainable revenue through technology and architecture driven consulting and solutions. Envisioned, architected, designed and developed multi-million e-commerce systems for premier US manufacturing service customer using Microsoft .NET Stack. Drive software engineering process through hackathon, peer and extreme programming. Co-authored IEEE white paper on use of technologies to provide retail health solutions, host and operate technology club and community. I've handed over the session to the Mrs. Anand.
Thank you, ma'am, for the nice introduction. Now I invite Mr. Prashant Parekh to kindly share his views about microservices. Sir, please handle the session.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Anandi. Am I audible to everyone? Can everyone hear me okay? Somebody can put in a comment or the reply so that I know I'm being heard. I'm not sure. Uh, can you all hear me? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I can see, I know you all cannot speak or I cannot hear you, but please use your chat and the comment box, and feel free to keep this interactive. Again, I thank uh, our faculty department of computer applications and computer science at DGVC for giving me this opportunity to present to you all some of the latest trends in technologies and focusing more on microservices today. Uh, as ma'am just read out, again, thanks, ma'am, for reading out my profile. Uh, I'm an alumni of DGVC, and I studied, like all of you are doing currently, MCA at DGVC, and I'm so proud of doing that. With that, without wasting much time, I'll toggle to our presentation. In between, as we are going through the presentation, if you have any questions, any doubts, please make use of the comment window so that at the end of the presentation, hopefully I'll stop at some time and then we can go through this questions. With that, let me just turn over to my presentation. Are you all able to see the presentation? Can I get some chat window to confirm that you were just able to see the presentation? Because it's hard to tell here, because I'm in this window, then I'm not in an. Okay. Thanks, Balaji. Thanks, Dinesh. I can. Okay. Thanks for the confirmation. So, okay, let me move on. Unfortunately, this is going to be a lot bit one-way, monologue. I was hoping that would have an interactive session, but that's fine. Keep your comments flowing in. I don't know how many of you have, heard things about microservices, and if not, I got a little bit inputs from Dr. Anandi ma'am, and she did give me an input that this might be something new for most of you who I understand today the MCA first years have joined us. So hopefully you would find this session useful. I try to keep it at the basic fundamental levels, and hopefully at the end of this session you will have enough things motivation to learn about what these microservices are. So the agenda in this session is IT trends and demands and the microservice. In fact, we're just going to focus on the microservice, and as a part of that, I try to cover, what are the trends and demands around it. So I'll start with the code. I just got this, from the internet. And Neil Armstrong, we know, who he was, one of the first astronomers, right? And if you look at what he has said, it's a small step for the man and giant leap for the mankind. And I thought it is appropriate for us, at least for those for whom microservices is new. If you take that little step, which we'll go through in today's presentation, and start learning microservices if you haven't done before, and I can almost assure you that you'll be taking a giant leap towards your career. So with that, let me move on. So what is microservice? Many of you might be asking that question. So first off, microservice is not a technology, is not a tool. Uh, it's not anything else. It's in short, in one word, it is just an architectural style, and it applies mostly towards software development. So what is a microservice? It is a style of how you develop applications. Now imagine any applications that you would have developed so far, right? And coming up to MCA first year, you would have developed some C programs or Java programs or even Python programs, whatever. So you would have developed those little programs, right? Every program has its own style. And if you choose a particular style and develop your application in that manner, and one of those style is called microservice, which we'll go through in a minute. Now, microservices also not just one little application. Typically, it is a suite of components. It's a set of services. When combined, set of smaller services. Hence the term micro. But the term micro, usually we associate with anything which is small, right, or is smaller. But here the term microservice or is really refers to a set of very small applications or programs that does one thing and one thing really well. And when all of them are combined together, that achieves a particular business need. So what is a microservice? It is a style. It is also a suite of components. Now what does microservice do, or what does microservice represent? It represents a particular business capability. So you can imagine any particular business capability. So for example, let's say developing an e-commerce site. So developing that e-commerce site is a business capability. Developing an application, for your college, let's say. So your college has an administration office, right? And then there are things that people do in that administration. So let's say if you're developing a website or an application for that administration department, that can be thought of as a business capability. Somebody is running a restaurant business, for example, right, and a hotel business. So if you are developing any application for that restaurant or a hotel, that's again a business capability. So essentially, what does microservice represent? When you develop an application, you can tell that that application represents that particular business capability. Now, some of the attributes of microservices is it's independently deployable, meaning if you develop this microservice application and when you deploy it onto server, typically you would develop in your laptop or a desktop. And when everything is done, usually we sort of deploy that on a server, and then from a server is where everyone accesses it, right? So when we deploy that, we say it should be independently deployable, meaning while deploying that microservice, if anything else is running on that server, or if that microservice is also communicating with another application while deploying your newer application that is microservice, it does not disturb anything else. That's why we say it should be independently deployable. Last but not the least, how does microservice communicate, or how can other applications communicate with the microservice application that you develop? Usually, it uses a very lightweight protocol such as HTTP or even REST. I assume all of you know what an HTTP is. It's the protocol that is typically used when we use our browsers, right? Both in our mobile phone browser as well as our desktop and laptop, right? Anytime we are using any site, I mean, all of you know, you are in master's course already, right? So you would have learned this already in your bachelor's course, or even in your schooling if you did any computer science subject there. REST stands for representation state transfer. It's again a kind of protocol. See, again, the term protocol basically means if you and I are discussing using some language. So right now I'm speaking in English, right? So you can call English as a protocol as well. So because I speak in some language and you understand that language. If I speak in Tamil, for example, right, and then you understand that, then Tamil becomes a protocol, right? So essentially, a protocol is a communication mechanism whereby two parties is able to understand what one is saying, and the other party understand basically what is being communicated to him or her. Like that, we have tons of protocols. Microservices typically use HTTP or REST protocols. So in a nutshell, what is a microservice? These are four or five things that you can remember. It's in style. It's a set of combinations of services, little small programs. It represents a particular business capability, meaning it solves a business problem. And when it is developed, when we are ready to deploy, it's easily deployable and communicates using HTTP or REST. So moving on, again continuing, what is microservice? Now I hope you are able to see this diagram. You can see, so this is a hexagon. If you recognize this shape, right, it has about six sides. So that's how microservice is design wise represented. This is nothing but your application that you code, that you write. You just start thinking of your favorite language, programming language, that is, that you code in already, right, or something that you are learning. And if your program or your application has the six different aspects, then you can call your program as microservice. Like basically, each of the six sites generically is called as an adapter. So you can visualize the adapters at your home, right? The plugs that we have. So right now, you might be, joining this webinar, through your mobile phone or through your laptop or a desktop, right? And you might have your charger connected to it, and that charger is connected to a wall socket, right? That adapter, on the wall that brings in the electricity. It's like that. If our program has number of adapters through which other programs can communicate to. So you can see adapter 1, 2, 3, adapter 4, 5, 6. Now on one of the adapter, browser can connect to it. So browser can communicate using your program. And how does it connect? Using that adapter. We call all of this as generic adapter. So we write a piece of code, and we'll see that in a minute, that allows browser to send whatever browser is being typed in the browser. If it gets to your program, then that happens through that adapter. So that is one. Second, REST API. I hope all of you have come across the term API. API is nothing but application programming interface. So basically, you write a little function or a method. I'm sure all of us have written, basic methods and functions in any modern languages, right? So that method, when exposed to the outside world, meaning outside your program, it basically the same method is being referred as API, right? So when anyone, not just the browser, any other application or any other microservice itself connects to your microservice, one of the method in the microservice or one or more method in microservice, it's called API. And if the protocol used is REST, it's called REST API. So that is again happening through an adapter. Now, on yet another adapter, your program can connect to a database. I'm sure again, all of you have done some basic, database programming as well, right? So the way you communicate, the part of the code that you write that communicates to the database on the other end, you can say that that is an adapter via which the programming instructs go out of your program and goes all the way up to database, executes those SQL or SQL statements, and then brings your data back, right? So that again you can imagine is happening through an adapter. So in a nutshell, a microservice consists of bunch of adapters using which you can communicate to outside world, meaning outside your your program. Hope this gives slightly an idea about microservice. So again, think of any program that you have written. One method is able to accept commands from browser. Another method accepts commands from another application. Yet then there is another port or another part of the code or method. Through that method you are communicating or connecting to the database, and then you can use another adapter using which you can, for example, send an email out. Another adapter you can use to make a log entry if you're doing logging in your application, so on and so forth. So if you have designed your programs like that, then you can call that as a microservice based program. Now, what you see on the right is an example of a small e-commerce, application. So I'm sure, many of you have done online shopping, right? Like Flipkart or Amazon, .com and things like that, right? Where we order, stuff online. So typically, how that online application itself would have been done. Of course, there's a browser, so there's a front end to it, but we are talking about back end. So microservice sits on the back end, side of the front end. Now, microservice is also a front end, but we are not talking about front end type of microservice. We are talking about back end type of microservice for today. So you can imagine when you go into Amazon.com, let's say to buy your latest mobile phone or any gadget that you typically ordered, from the online site, they will have one microservice application, which is called account service. So when you are ready to place an order, you would have to enter some, payment information, and then your account gets created automatically. So there is a microservice that does that. So it's an accounting service. And you can imagine that accounting service could be connecting to an accounting database, or it can be connecting to a generic database in which account table is created, which stores all the account info. Same way, you can imagine another microservice which keeps track of the inventory of products, right? So how many of, let's say, smartphones I have, right? So that is again a service is providing that feature and functionality, as you can see on the right. Then there's a shipping service. The moment you are ready to order and then do a checkout, it will ask you, where do you want to ship that particular product or set of products to, right? So there's a shipping service that takes care of, keeping your shipping information and things like that. It could be same as your, home information, but it could be different, as well. So that way you can imagine all different services all put together becomes a complete application. But at the smallest level, it performs one clearly called out thing and one thing only, and it does that one thing very well. You can also imagine we can develop just one program that does all of these three things also. Nothing sort of wrong per se. But what happens is in a big real application, if one application does every thing, just by itself, even with different methods or even with object orientation and all that, it becomes so difficult to manage. If you have to change something, if you have to add new functionality, if you have to fix certain bugs or defects every time, you have to change that application, and that one application becomes so big that it becomes difficult to handle that. By separating that one big application into smaller individual application, it becomes easier to manage that individual application, package them, compile them, and then deploy them onto server individually. In fact, so much so that each of these services can be developed and worked upon by a different team altogether, right? And each team is aware of the other team, who might be working on another service, just by knowing only their APIs, meaning the method signatures alone that they need to know. Rest they don't need to care about how the other service has created, their database, what is the database model, for example, and how they have done their coding. In fact, different services can be developed in different languages itself. There's no hard and fast rule that all these services should be done in only one language. One can be in, .NET C Sharp. Another can be in Java. Another can be in, any other language. It doesn't really matter as long as they know how to communicate with each other. So that's kind of the advantage, in a very simplistic advantage of, the microservices. Okay, I'll be moving on. If you have any queries and doubts, as I said, I cannot toggle back to the comments window, but just keep noting any of your comments there. Let me move on. So now you can say, okay, so why should I learn, microservice in the first place? Why is that my department has asked me to join on a nice, sunny Saturday afternoon in Chennai? Rain has been stopped for a couple of, or almost a week now since last Sunday. The rain has stopped. So on a weekend, we should be actually going out, right, on a sunny day because we have manage through this rainy season and all that, right? So why is it important to me as as an MCA student or any computer science student? Again, just simple things. If you were to just do googling right now and look at microservice openings in India, okay, I just did this yesterday. So you can see 77,690 plus openings all across India. So if you learn this microservice and prepare your resume and profile and tell your prospective employers, right, that I know this microservice. Now you know for your final year students at MCA, I hope you all of know, currently as we are having this session, I was given to understand that they are in that campus interview, that is going on currently. So, when your time comes to go through the campuses, if you put this, that this microservice, I can tell you right now, and it is true even for the next, not just 3 years. I know MCA is now 2 years, but microservice is important for next 5 years, next 10 years. So this is not going to go away. This architecture style is not going away anytime soon. So it's in your own interest, to learn that. If you just search again, same thing, microservice openings in US, you can search anywhere, where you want to go eventually, or just, go for some time, right? US, UK, Europe, anywhere that you aspire to go to. And just LinkedIn alone, you would see that there are 61,000 openings, right? Of course, at different experience levels and all that. But what is really important is how to design and develop Microsoft, right? So I think these are good enough reasons for most of us. I'm making an assumptions that who, after completing MCA, are looking to get into a job, right? But this does not is not only for people who are seeking to get a job. It is also for people who want to start their own, business in the software, or not even in the software. You might be an MCA to start, your own startup or a business, even in a non-IT area. There also, if you know how to learn and how this microservice works, it is of immensely useful, there as well. Now, I don't know. There are a couple of big IT consulting companies called Gartner and Forrester, and those are the people. See, many big corporations, many big companies, including in India, US, and everywhere in the world, they listen to Gartner. What they have to say. So Gartner does their research, and so it's basically a research and consulting company. They are not, software development company or anything like that, but they are more in the consulting side. So they publish their consulting research in a lot of different areas that affects various industries. And if you look at what they have to say about microservice, this is what they are telling business. There is a clear return on investment. So any company, CEO or CIO or CFO, they are looking at what Gartner is saying. And if Gartner is saying that if you, in your company, if you build microservice based applications, your the spend that you're going to have, either by hiring people who can develop this or by outsourcing your IT work to a different company, you have a very clear return on investment. Right? So that's again an important. See, remember, it's one thing as a student, as an aspiring, as an aspiring, a person to get into job market. It's one thing to understand what is there in the job market today. It's also important to understand what are companies looking for directly, right? What kind of skill set companies looking to hire, not just directly job opening, right? What is the problem statements faced by companies, and if you understand that, it will become a lot more easier for you to decide. And I think first year, doing your masters is probably the right time to sort of pin down. Many of you probably know clearly what you want to do, as you complete your masters. But for some of you who haven't still decided exactly, other than knowing that I just need to get a good job, just understand what is troubling business, where are the business opportunities, then you would find that microservice is a good opportunity. And lastly, this is what Forrester has to say as well, which is increase organizations rate of digital change. Everybody in today's world is changing from the traditional IT company to a more modern digital and cloud based organization. And anything modern or digital microservice style of applications is the first class thing within that. So it's very important for anyone to learn this, and it's important to learn it like right now. So now moving on, you can say, okay, so how easy or tough, it is. How easy or tough microservices? Well, it kind of really depends, how much you want to learn. So what I would say is, it's kind of easy to start. It's so very, darn easy to start with it, and I'll show that to you in a minute. And then next, in just 10 minutes flat, you can actually create a microservice. That's how easy it is, right? But it is challenging to keep it updated in the most efficient manner. So if you want to build a microservice that solves a particular business problem, there are a lot more things that goes into that. So as an aspiring software developer, or a a person who can apply, see, we are doing masters in computer applications, right? So we should be knowing how computers, as a science, as an engineering, we can apply that to solve business problems, right? So that's what our degree gives us, that we know, when ideally a company hires us, they know that this set of people know how to apply computers to solve my business problems, right, or to solve clients business problems. So when we are creating microservices, it's we have to understand what goes into it, to make it much more efficient. So when I say efficient, it could mean a lot of different things. A couple of examples there. It could mean that our application is running at the least cost, right? I don't want to spend a lot more in buying servers, memories, and things like that, more than I need to, more than my application needs. So that's one definition of efficient. Another definition of efficient is it's running in the fastest manner possible, right? So that's another definition of efficient. So it takes a lot more effort to build a very efficient microservice. It's so easy to start with, but if you want to build real life application, you have to just incrementally learn. That's what basically it means. Okay, so what is the technology, or what exactly I have to learn? Now that you know microservice is an architecture style, there are a lot of openings in that. It's so easy to start with, and but I have to put in a lot more effort to build real world microservices. So what are the technologies, right? What exactly I have to learn? The good news there is, you can pick any of your favorite fundamental technology stack. Example, you can see four of them here. .NET, that is C sharp as a language. .NET is the framework. Java, both as a language, as well as your JDK, Python, and Node.js. Anyone, it's not all four. Anyone, and there are openings across any of these four stacks. right? It's not just one. And if you, from the microservice perspective, if you just learn to develop microservice in any one of the stack, you can very easily learn the other stack. So in my days when I was doing MCAs, learning one or two languages was like a big deal. Once you learn this couple of languages, you're done. You don't need to learn anything else. But today's world, it's not like that. You should be ready to learn any language on demand, right? So just keep things open. Learn one language very well, modern language, learn very well. Other language you'd be able to pick up, just like in the snap of fingers. Now, next, selecting a language is one thing. Next, you need to understand a framework, or you need to pick a framework that goes with your favorite language when it comes to developing microservices. So, for example, in .NET, you would use a framework called ASP.NET Core, and within that, there's a web API. That is the framework that you would use to create microservices. The .NET itself gives a lot of different frameworks. Like one framework you can use to develop websites. There's another framework that you can develop, console-based application. There's another framework that you can use to develop Windows-based application that runs only on Windows. Like that, there is a framework called ASP.NET Core that you can use, only that framework, if you want to develop microservices, right? So that framework, learning that alone is enough. You don't have to learn the entire, the .NET side of things. It's okay. And then on the Java, there's a framework, a popular open source framework called Spring Boot. That is what you would use to develop microservices. In Python, there are two frameworks, popular frameworks called Flask or Fast API. Any one, again, is enough. Same way in Node.js, Express.js or Molecular are two other popular frameworks. So just pick one, out of this, and then, you're good. Last but not the least, sorry, I have a typo there. It means to learn just one database. Just pick one database, and I would suggest pick one open source, right? Either PostgreSQL or MySQL. I would understand, or I would assume that most of you are already familiar with MySQL, and that should be good enough. But if you're haven't picked up learning a database, I would suggest start with PostgreSQL. It's so immensely popular, and then so flexible and easy. We can start learning that. And if you know some of this already, like SQL Server or Oracle, you are good as well. Nothing different that you need to do. And I'm sure all of you have heard of NoSQL database technologies. It's also okay to learn, one of this. I put a couple of options here, CouchDB and MongoDB. Just learning at least one is good enough. So NetNet, what is important is just pick, one of this. What's your favorite? What's easy for you, right? What is your favorite doesn't have to be the toughest. There are openings, demands, and you can make careers, in any, one of this. So last but not the least, and definitely we should not forget, today's session is not about DevOps. I'm sure all of you would have heard the term DevOps. I'm not going to go into details, of what a DevOps is, but DevOps is just so important, and it cuts across anything that you learn, not just the microservice. If you're learning to develop as a part of your course different types of applications, DevOps again, plays a role there. So DevOps is like horizontal. It cross cuts any type of applications, that you are learning, right? And hopefully, if we get another chance, then we'll, maybe I can conduct a session for it. You all, if you are not aware of DevOps, but just remember that DevOps is something that you also have to learn. But today's session is all about microservice. Okay. Now that you know what technologies you have to learn, the next thing you have to pick up your favorite development editor or even an IDE, right? This is something that you might already be using. I'm just calling out a few, and these are not just restricted to what I'm going to list here. Just continue to work with your tool, but just know that your tool allows you to develop your microservice. Visual Studio Code, or VS Code in short, that allows you to develop in any language, be it .NET C Sharp, Java, Python, Node.js, VS Code supports everything. Then, of course, IntelliJ or NetBeans are most popularly used to do the Java-based development. Eclipse is also there. I've not called out Eclipse. Eclipse used to be so popular in my days, but today I see a lot more popularity in IntelliJ. So just pick that tool, and most likely, see, I'm talking from the client and company's perspective. What I see, how our clients use, IntelliJ is most popular. So if you are familiar with IntelliJ, if Java is your favorite language, then that would definitely help you. If your college, for example, requires you to use Eclipse, that's fine also. But I think as your personal this thing, just start installing IntelliJ and start using it. If you are a Python fan, just like I am, you can use PyCharm. But I don't use PyCharm. I use VS Code and do all my Python, development using VS Code. But PyCharm is one of the nice tools that you have. So you can pick any of your favorite. Okay, so that's the tool set. Now. Now the good part. So if you were to code a microservice like right now, and I think you can actually do that, but we are not in a workshop type of a session. If you all like it, you can request your faculty, your HOD, that we want to have a workshop type of a session. And I've been doing a lot of uh, not whole lot recently, but I've done some workshop type of a sessions where in this sort of webinars we actually develop applications together. So you should be joining this, with your laptops or your desktop open. On one window, you are looking at whatever I'm doing, or person on the other end is developing, and you do that along. So it's like coding, together online, right? So that's kind of the workshop that I usually do. But anyway, today is more of a one-way type of a session. So I'm just going to show you snippets of when you write a microservice code. How does it look? Okay, so let's look at for those of you who like .NET and C Sharp. So after installing .NET in your laptop or a desktop or even in your lab, I'm sure you have it already set up in your college. You just open up your command prompt, command window, type first command .NET, then you just type this .NET new web API minus O stands for the output. Just give some name of your microservice that you want to develop, just my microservice. And you can give some additional parameters. No HTTPS, meaning you are not developing a secure HTTPS. If you recognize, means a secure site. For that you need to do a little bit more configuration, but that's not important right now. And minus F stands for the framework. The latest .NET framework is 6.0, and you can specify older framework. I assume that what you might have, or at least in your lab, is either 4.5 or 5, right? So you can specify the framework. You don't even have to specify it. That's all you have to do. And what it does is, you see this little box on the right, that's the actual entire microservice code that it generates. So you are actually not writing a code. The code is generated for you, and this is all there is to it for the microservice. So it generates a simple microservice called my microservice, and it has one method. You can focus on this down below. The name of the method is get weather forecast. And what it does is it prepares about 5 dummy values of the weathers, and it just puts some dummy values here. What is happening here is not important. What is important is there is a name for your API. This is what is called as API in the microservice, right? So it has automatically generated for you. Of course, you would take this and then start adding your own, coding your own, and modifying even the existing ones, right? And you can see it's basically a class, as you would have learned. If you have already learned C Sharp, everything is class, right? So there's a basically a weather forecast controller. Controller meaning this is a microservice. and then it has some additional code as well. It is doing some logging and things like that. So that's all it takes to develop your first microservice. Okay. And then once this is done, you run your application and then fire open your browser. And if you have done this already, you know actually it opens up browser automatically and navigates to your microservice API. It kind of becomes an website, but it's really not a website, it's an API. uh, Only if you do this, you would know if you haven't done this already. Just open up your browser, type this URL, and you will get the output of this function. So now you can tell, people that you have developed microservice. Okay, and you won't be wrong if you're telling of this stuff. Okay, so now let's look at another example. Let's say if Java is your favorite language. What you can do is there is a site called Spring Initializer. You don't even need to have the IDE, IntelliJ, Eclipse, or anything like that. You can do this all online, and that is okay because many client customers do that. So it generates initial set of code. Then you can get that entire code, entire solution project, download it to your local, laptop or a desktop, and then you can start modifying it. But to generate initial microservice, just go to that website springinitializer.io. After this session, you can try that and give some basic values. It can be whatever you want to give here, and then just say generate down below here, and it will generate the entire microservice application code for you. And the same thing as before. So here, if you have called out demo, you will have a microservice site called demo. That's it. Then you can open up your code in Eclipse or IntelliJ or whatever the tool, and you will see the entire code, here. Now let's look at one more example in Python. As I said, is my favorite. So Python, you go into the VS Code, or you don't need think any of this. You can just use a Notepad text editor. And here I've used the Fast API framework. If you remember, I'd mentioned Fast API and Flask are the two frameworks you can use to build microservices. So I've used the Fast API here. These are the 5 lines of code I have to write to build the microservice. So first I'm importing a library, or in Python word it's called a package. Some of you have already done Python coding, you know what I mean, a Python package. You initialize it, and then you create a method, and using this annotation or a decorator, sometimes it's called a decorator or annotation. We just put this return real Python, and just like before, if you type this URL, because I gave only slash here, I can give slash demo slash weather forecast slash whatever. So then that is what you would put in here, and you will get this output in your browser, just like before. So it's so easy, to build a microservice API. Okay, I think we are getting pretty close. So I'll try to wrap up quickly so that hopefully we'll have time after this to take up some questions and comments. Okay, so now let's say you said that, okay, I've done coding and it's running also. Now what? Where do I go from here? So I'll just be a little bit fast. Hope I could spend some time, but in the interest of we are running out of time. Uh, Anandi ma'am, you can tell me if we will have more time or our session will cut off here. Can I take 10 minutes more? I have 2 more slides to go through. Ma'am, are you there? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Do we have a little bit more time? Can we go beyond
Yes, yes, sir.
4
Yes,
p.m.?
yes. You can continue, sir.
Okay, okay. Thanks. Hopefully, we'll try and wrap it up by 4:15.
Okay, sir.
Presentation, you know, um, I'll try to wrap it up in next, 5-10 minutes, and then we'll have time for the questions. But I think this is the most important part, which usually you don't get to know about this unless somebody tells you. So let's say you have developed microservice already. You haven't written so much code, right? It's okay. Don't write so much code in the very first time. See, our key task is to develop that microservice and put it onto the cloud, and which is what I have here. So you've done the coding, your application is working in your lab, in your laptop, in your desktop. Now, what should you do? What you to do is you can put your microservice, the simple test thing that you develop, right, on any cloud platform. I've just called out four here: DigitalOcean, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. GCP stands for Google. I highly recommend that you do this if you haven't done that already. Okay. Now, and when you go to any of this place, and my favorite is of course DigitalOcean and AWS. It's so easy to get started with. So you'll obviously have to open an account. Some of you might have done this already, but those of you who have not opened or done this, just go to open an account in AWS. That's all. You type in Google, and then you will know what to do next. Same thing with DigitalOcean. So now, what do we need? Let's say you have an account in any one of this cloud provider. Next thing, you know what you need to run your application that you just developed, your microservice application. You basically need a machine. Just like, let's say you're developing this in your laptop or a desktop, right? So you need that laptop or a desktop in the cloud. That is basically called as virtual machine. So Azure and GCP calls them as virtual machines, or in short, just VMs. AWS calls it as EC2, or Elastic Compute Cloud. It's the same thing as just getting your own laptop or a desktop on cloud. And DigitalOcean calls the same thing as Droplets. So different people use different terminologies. It's basically getting your own laptop on the cloud. So let's say tomorrow you have to buy a new laptop to do a lot more work. You can actually buy a new laptop in the cloud. Okay, so this is your own laptop in the cloud. Now, just know this. We don't have time to get into this, but just know this: you can deploy that application not just directly onto any machine. You can deploy them into containers, and you can also deploy them onto what is known as serverless platforms. And I'll not go into details of this. Some of you who know these two terms, containers and serverless, you know what I'm referring to. But just to keep things simple for today, what you want to do is next: get an account set up in any one, just one in of this cloud vendor. Second, once you go in there, just create for yourself a virtual machine, and you would know. You can specify what kind of virtual machine, how much disk space, how much RAM, all of that you can tell. And yeah, so this is what I was just telling. So just you need to create an account. Of course, when you create an account, it will ask for credit card, and it's okay to use the credit card. You will not be charged. Just make sure that you are signing up for the free account, and all of these cloud vendors provide certain free. So this $100 is 100 USDs, or up to 1 year free. People provide. They will still want your credit card just to make sure that it's a real person using that. They will also charge like 1 rupee or 2 rupee, but that 2 rupee you will get credited back in the 24 hours business day. And I think it's okay. You should invest at least that much on this. And if you don't want to use cloud, you can always stop your account there. You can cancel it before all the free time period or the free money value expires, right? Just like your prepaid mobile charge, just remember to close it if you don't want to continue. But I highly recommend that you continue, and I've done this multiple times and with the other workshops as well. So I highly recommend doing this. So now, okay, let's say you are able to run the service in the cloud. Now can you tell that you are ready to get into an interview? And then will you be able to get the job? Because now you've done a lot of things, right? You've learned how to, develop microservice after all of those tools set up and all that. You know how to create a, machine on the cloud and deploy your service and things like that. Well, not exactly. But yes, you have done quite a bit of work. But are you, ready? I would say, not exactly. So there are 6 steps. Still you need to go to. Yes, 6 steps, and I'll go through them fast. And if it is something that you're not able to understand, just make a note of this step, and then we can discuss after I stop. Step one, create source code repository. I assume some of you know, I'm referring to GitLab, GitHub, or Bitbucket, or things like that. That's that's the first thing. Step two, you need to learn Git commands. You need to know how Git works, meaning you are doing development in your local laptop or even in your lab, but your code needs to sit in a centralized repository, and how you can send your code from your local desktop back to the Git server, and then back and all that. There is a Git command. All of this is part of DevOps, by the way. If you're doing all of this, you are already learning DevOps. Remember, I told you earlier that DevOps is important. So all this are actually part of DevOps. So learn how to update the code that was automatically generated for you. Obviously, you need to write code yourself. So do that. Update the existing codes if it's already generated for you by some of those tools. So that's the step two. Step three, you need to do this as well, meaning create the database by yourself, and then connect to that same database from your microservice application, right? So write some DB scripts, basically some SQL statements like create table, table name, all of that. If you remember, I'm sure all of you would have done that. So just remember those SQL scripts. I'm not talking about the tool-based thing, right? You need to know SQL commands. That's important. And when you save all those SQL commands in some text file, like with .sql extension, we call them as DB scripts. So DB scripts is nothing but just your SQL command saved as a text file with .sql extension. So that's number three. And then number four, this is another so important thing. Whatever code or the methods that you have developed, you need to write another set of code that tests your method within your code itself. And when you do that, it's called unit test cases. I don't know if you have come through this, but if you have not learned about unit testing, I'm sure through your couple of years of MCA, if you have software engineering paper, you would come across this. But the point is, you need to develop or understand unit test cases. Again, just know for now, very simplistically, unit test cases are nothing but the code that sets or the set of classes that you code and you keep alongside your regular code, and when you execute this code, it actually tests your the real code, right? So that's what unit test cases. Also learn to review your own code. There are a lot of code quality tools in all the languages. And if you just run those tools against your code, it will tell you what is good, what is bad, what is not properly secured, and things like that. Learn how to run that tool. And then whatever it tells you that this is not good, this is, you can improve upon, learn how to fix your code, right? And then run all these things. So this is another important. Step five here is, every time you're doing all of this, whatever I just talked about earlier, right? Just create, branches and things like that. I told you about, if you are not familiar with it, it actually requires a different session. So it is not fair for me to expect all of you to know, this thing. But just remember that there's a branching and merging concept that you need to get familiar. It's not that difficult, but it can get confusing at times. But if you are looking yourself to get a real job, then these are the real things that we need to learn as well. And the last step is, do the same thing in the server that you have created in the cloud environment. Remember that virtual machine EC2 or Droplet? These are your machines on the cloud, just like your laptop or a desktop. So do all the things there in that server, and from your local laptop, put your application in that server. If you have done that, now my service is running in the cloud. Everything you have done, a little bit of Git, a little bit of DevOps, branching, merging, all of that. Now you can say you are ready. Yes, you can say to any prospective employees, yes, I'm ready. There is a lot more things to be done. See, don't get complacent, right? we are just uh, you know we have just traveled 1 kilometer, okay, but we have just begun our journey. We have not come to the end of destination. Let's say from Chennai you are all going to Trichy, right? So you're just from Chennai to Trichy is about 550 kilometers or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it's some 500 plus kilometers. So remember, you need to go 500 kilometers, and you're just you know gone a kilometer now, right? But it's a great start. I think this itself is good enough. You can impress upon any hirer, or in any interview. You can easily clear. Uh, okay, so how can you get started? If doing by yourself sounds a little bit tedious or complicated, just form a team, collaborate with others. And in the Git itself, invite in your college class itself, you can form a team of 5 member, 2 member, whatever, and all of you can jointly develop one service, and contribute one method towards that. Do some joint team based development. What you will learn through that is again an immense experience that any company who's looking to hire would want, because in company most likely you'd be developing as a part of the team. And then last but not the least, I'm sure your professors have been telling you this, and you would have learned this in school as well. And this applies to me also. Even after you get a nice job or have your company or whatever anywhere in the world, there is no substitute for this. Practice, practice, practice. In technology world, you can never say that you have learned everything, right? There's always something new to learn. So just keep practicing your skill, and then try to get better at it. So I'll just stop here, and I'll also stop speaking now, and I'll open for questions now. Let me also stop sharing.
Students, you can post your queries in the chat box.
Hope I have not put any of you into sleep Saturday afternoon after a heavy meal or something. Hope all of you are still awake. Just say
Student,
yes, or just say, Prashant, I've fallen asleep. That's also okay. I know I would have to improve on certain area. I don't mind, but just say something. I'll request your, faculties and HOD not to scold you if you say that, sir, it was boring session. That's okay. Because usually people say that if somebody external is coming in and doing a session, we have to be nice, we have to be respectful and all that. I don't tend to think of it like that. Just think of me as just your seniors, right? And how you would interact with your seniors. Just consider me like that. Of course, I've become a little bit old than just your normal MCA senior. But if there are no questions,
so there is a
and
question.
either you have understood. Okay, sir, can you tell me what's the difference between service oriented architecture and microservice? Super, very good question, Dinesh. So, just to keep it short, service oriented architecture means it's also an architecture style. just like I said in the beginning, microservices and architecture style. So the key difference is in service orientation, when we develop and code our application, the methods that we write inside our application, that does too many things or implements a lot of functionalities in the service oriented architecture. Whereas when you write microservice methods, that microservice does only one thing. Now, if you need to do multiple things, then you will write them as multiple functions and multiple methods. That's the core difference. I can go into very detailed difference. Um, and then another key difference is service-oriented architectures usually work on protocol called SOAP. Yes, it's the soap that we use while bathing, right? It's that soap, SOAP. Uh, so that's basically an XML-based soap. So the data that it carries between your browser and your application is heavy duty, whereas REST protocol, which is what microservice uses, it's very lightweight. It uses JSON, format, JSON. So it's very lightweight. So two main differences: service-oriented architected-based applications are, does a lot more things in a single method, in a single class, whereas microservice does only one thing, but you may have multiple of that, small thing. Second, SOA uses most typically SOAP protocol, whereas microservice uses REST protocol. Both are working on top of HTTP protocol. So HTTP is common between both. Hope that helps. Any other question? Was this useful at all? Did you get to learn something different, something new? Sir, which is better to use, microservice, Python, or Node.js? And please tell what is relation between DevOps and microservice. Okay, another great question. When it comes to Python and Node.js, the way I approach it is look at the market. And from my perspective, there are openings both in Python and Node.js. So I would just pick one. Just ask yourself what is easy for you. Is Python easy for you? Node.js easy for you? If Python is easier, just go with Python, and you won't be wrong. You would, do well when you complete your MCA, right? So just pick one. Whatever you're comfortable with. Second part of the question: what's the difference between DevOps and microservice? DevOps is the set of activities that you do in order to design, develop, and deploy your software. So DevOps is basically an engineering practices. So basically, let's say if I tell you that okay, you need to develop an application for your MCA department. Let's say you need to develop a website for MCA department at your college. Let's say we have that requirement. So now when you want to develop a website for your department, so obviously you will need to have a web-based front end, and then behind that front end you will have a back end, and back end is, let's say, it's microservice. So you would need to decide, okay, I need to have 4 microservice to develop, and then you will have one database as well. Now DevOps is something that you would decide. Okay, so now another thing you will decide is, okay, so there are 10 students who are going to develop that. Okay, 10 students are going to develop front end, 10 students are going to develop back end, 10 students are going to develop database, right? So then you decide that where each of this team is going to keep their source code. Then you decide what tools that you have to run on top of your source code, which will tell you whether your source code is good, bad, if there are security problems with it, things like that. And then lastly, um, you tell, you do something that takes your source code from the source code repository and directly puts it into some cloud server. When you do all of those things, what you're doing is DevOps. When you are actually coding your application, that is microservice. So hope you're able to understand the difference. In one line, microservice is actually developing the application. DevOps is doing everything around that application to get that application into the server. All of those activities are called DevOps in a very loose and colloquial manner. And again, I've not explained. You will see in the Google, DevOps is the combination of two terms: development and operations. So it's a usually in any company you will have a development team and then you will have an operations team. Operations team manages all the infrastructure, configuration, things like that. They don't code the application. Application coding is done by the application development team, the software development team. But traditionally, once the software is developed, the software development team hands over that code to the operations team, and then operations team figure out in which server I need to put, which two servers I need to connect, and all that. So that is what he used to do like 15 years back, when I started. But today's world, uh, what an operations engineer does and what a software engineer or a software specialist does is all kind of combined. So hence the term DevOps. Hope that helps. I don't know who that is. It's MCA Computer Applications A. I guess you're a bit afraid to put your name there. So okay, that's fine. I hope it answers your question. So, ma'am, I'll leave it up to you how long we can go, from here. But I'm open. I can stay on, till 4:30. If there are any more questions, even from any of you, ma'am, you know, this is if you have any questions or if you find today's session useful, let me know. So going forward, so this is Veera Raghavan Sridharan. Will Python overshadow Java? See, if you ask me, I've been telling, right, Python is my favorite because I like it. So I'll say yes. But if you ask the same question to someone who likes Java, they'll say no, Java is the most popular and things like that. So it's kind of um, it doesn't really matter if you ask me. Java is still the most used language across the world. But will Python overshadow? The way after 25 years in the industry, I tend to look at it as just doesn't really matter. There are certain types of applications that you can do very well in Python. There are certain types of applications that you can run very well in Java. So both are important. Um, it just depends on the context of what you're looking at. So if your context is right now you're in MCA 1, your first objective is to complete your let's say MCA, and then you have to get a good job. If that's the context, then you have to see, will learning Java will get you that achieve your goal, then go for Java. But if you feel that no, Python will get you that that, then go with Python. To me, both will get you that. So again, just pick one, whichever is easier for you. Just learn everything about whatever you do, right? Learn it well. That's important. Okay, let's go to the next question. Tirumurugan is asking, sir, how independent microservice communicate with each other? Again, excellent question. Uh, as we saw earlier, microservice communicates using REST and HTTP protocols. But let's say you have two microservices, and one microservice needs to communicate with another microservice, and both are running on the server, right? And both are on this side, and on the other side there is front end, and on the back end there are two services. Um, so how do microservice communicators? Of course, you can directly make an API call. One microservice can directly call the method inside another microservice using the same REST API. That's the most basic way of calling. But what is more proper way of calling is the calling microservice will actually create a message and put it into a message queue. I haven't discussed about message queue, but imagine there is another type of a database store called a queue. So one microservice, whatever it needs to communicate, it puts that message into the queue. Another microservice subscribes to that particular queue. It's like your newspaper subscription, it's like your email subscription. So you subscribe to that particular newspaper or email, and whenever that newspaper is published, you get that message. So that's how two microservices communicate. And bottom line, there's more than one way of communicating between independent microservices. One is to just directly call using its URL, using its API. It knows where that microservice is running. So it's the same URL that you type in your browser, right? So one microservice needs to know the URL of the other microservice, and it can communicate that way. Or one microservice knows that I can put a message in this particular queue, and I know that the exact microservice I want to send this message to will receive it. So that's the other most common way of communicating. Hope that helps, Pramod. Any any other question? Are you all going to try this and create a cloud environment, or as soon as our professor closes this session, we'll just forget and go about doing our things? Maybe some of you haven't had your lunch, so obviously lunch is important. But my thing is, you know if you felt that you have learned something new, uh, you know try this. And I'm always available. My contact is there. Feel free to reach out to me directly. Sir, which is easy to learn, Java or Python? This is no brainer. This is Python is most easiest to learn. Python, now, right? CBSE class 9 have introduced Python. So 9 standard students are learning this. You better learn this being in MCA and learn it well. Otherwise, you will be competing against 9 standard student. Don't let yourself do that. Just learn it well. But yeah, I mean, not to say that Java is bad or difficult. It is also easy. It's just that Python is so easy. That's why Python is so popular. Okay, any other question? I'm just hoping that some of you would are excited enough to build a microservice and get yourself a cloud server and then start playing with it. That's the best investment you can make on your behalf. Just ask your dad or mom, ask your father or Manish, to just give you 1,000 rupees. Um, great, great, Arshad. So just try that. 1,000 rupees will get you, maybe two large pizzas. So for two large pizzas, you can actually get yourself put your application, on the cloud, and imagine, how much marketable you make yourself. Okay, great. Any problems? You'll have tons of info in the Google as well. But if you have any doubt, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available in call, WhatsApp, this email. Just do that. I don't mind. We have about 4 minutes more. Just say you are not sleeping. I'll be happy. Or say if you're sleeping also, I'd be okay. Nothing bad about it. It's that time, of the day. Difficult to get around that. Maybe you should, anytime in the future we have afternoon session like this, just have some, strong Andhra rasam. Okay. That will keep you awake if not the session. Just have something spicy to keep all of us awake. Anyway, I'm just trying to joke around, but hoping if there are any questions. How many people have joined today, by the way? Is there a way to tell?
45, sir.
45. Okay, great.
First MCS.
Okay, okay. Great. Hope Monday, when you are back into the class, I'm sure you will ask your seniors as to who got the job, or more importantly, what was the question asked and things like that, so that you can prepare yourself right now. If not on microservices, or ask them, was there any question on microservices? Anyone else? Any question? Or did I miss any question? All right, ma'am. I don't think we
Okay, sir.
need to keep anyone holding. If
Okay, sir.
yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir, for the nice and interactive session on microservices. Surely we will arrange a workshop on microservices in future. Now I request Dr. MP Suhasini, Assistant Professor of MCA, to deliver vote of thanks.
Anandi, am I audible, Anandi?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank our webinar speaker, Mr. Prashant Parekh, for enlightening us with his knowledge. Today's webinar on services was full of knowledge. It gave deep insights into the topic, what is the basics of microservices, the technologies required for the microservices, then future scope of microservices in IT industry, and the other services and other basic things required for to learn this microservices and upload it deployed in a cloud. All this was a very informative and interesting topics today it was covered, and I'm sure that our students have gained knowledge on this microservices. Once again, I thank you, Mr. Prashant sir. It was very informative and interesting. We didn't sleep at all throughout, we were watching it only.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Also,
Thanks for the opportunity.
Also, I thank our secretary and principal for giving us permission to organize this webinar. I'm grateful to thank our respected HOD sir, Dr. T. Santanam, for his great support in organizing this webinar, and all other staff members for coordinate who has shown their extended their cooperation in organizing this webinar in a successful way. Finally, I thank our students who shown interest in participating in this webinar. Finally, with this, we come to the end of the session. Students, please wait. I'll post the attendance link in the chat box, and then, yeah, ma'am has posted the attendance link in the chat box. Mark your attendance. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Just have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.